Hi, dreamers. If you follow me on Twitter, you realize that most of the time I act really dumb. But sometimes I give some good information here and there. And along with my fitness updates, and yeah, that's me, and stupid memes, and occasionally a mashup of art history. Besides when I act dumb, intermittently I'll point out some new information, like the fact that YieldMax announced recently that they have a new distribution schedule, and that effectively their YMAX and YMAG funds are now going to be moved to weekly distributions, and the rest of their funds they're actually going to stagger into groups, group A, B, C, and D, so that I guess if you own ETFs in each of the groups, the rotation of that will end up paying out weekly. So today I thought I'd revisit the YieldMax funds and tell you my position on how I feel about YieldMax overall, which ones I like and which ones I'm not that big of a fan of. So let's dive in. Alright, so let's just start with the YieldMax funds overall. And you can see here they have a dizzying array of ETFs with massive distribution rates. And you can see some of them here with PayPal at 114%. So if we take a look at the full list here, you can see an ETF based on Tesla at about 75% yield, one based on NVIDIA at about a 70% yield, another one based on Amazon at about a 40% yield, and so on. And over the last few months, they've really expanded to add a ton of new ETF options with very high yields, and even some new ones like CRSH, which is a YieldMax short Tesla position with an 85% yield. And with such a high yield, you might be asking yourself the question, are these just too good to be true? And how do they work? Well, as you recall, a while ago, I actually did a video explaining exactly how these YieldMax funds work. And if you go to my favorite stocks, you can find this video right here, where I talk about Tesla, but also OARK, APLY, NVDY, and just in general how all of them work. And so let's cut to the chase on how they've performed. And unfortunately, they're so new, we have to use a very short time frame. So over the last 6 months, NVDY has had a total return of about 23%, which if you just owned NVIDIA outright, you would have beat handily. And then there's TSLY based on Tesla, which has had a total return of 17%. Then you have their YMAG fund at a total return of 11%. And I put in just the regular S&P so that you could see the comparison here. So if you had just held the S&P 500, you would have had about a 10% return. Then there's AMZY, which is based on Amazon, at about a 5% return. MSFO, based on Microsoft, at a 2% return. And then their YMAX fund, delivering a whopping negative 2.35% total return. And believe it or not, these are the ones that performed well. If we skip over to some of their other ones, we have OARK delivering a negative 6% return, AIYY delivering a negative 26% return, Coney with a negative 25% return, MSTY at a negative 6%, and then you get into some that haven't even been around for 6 months. YBIT, GDXY, and ABNY. So if we take this down to 1 month, we can see the returns of some of these, which are also not trending in a very good direction. So let's talk about why that is. So essentially, what we're seeing here is NAV erosion. And what is NAV erosion? Well, for that I just turned to a quick Fidelity article. And this talks about CEFs in particular, but I liked this sentence because it generally sums it up well. It talks about that share price and distributions are generally linked together, and that some funds distribute more money than their portfolios are generating. And they do this by distributing your own capital back to you. And this is called destructive return of capital. And the key sentence here is that over time, a distribution consistently paid from a destructive return of capital will erode a fund's NAV, or net asset value. and that with an eroded NAV, the fund has less capital to generate future income and capital gains. And so that is what we are seeing with these YieldMax funds. Because their distributions are so incredibly high, it's effectively in self-destruct mode. So needless to say, I'm not a big fan of these YieldMax funds. And some people say the only ones worth holding are the YMAG and YMAX funds, which are kind of roll-ups of a bunch of these. So let's take a look at those two and see if they're worth holding. Well, here we have YMAG, and basically it's the holding of the Magnificent Seven funds of the YieldMax funds. And so you can see the holdings here. The YieldMax funds for Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, and Tesla. And actually, if you're gonna hold some YieldMax funds, these are the ones that actually haven't performed terribly. If you take a look at the return of each one, at least they're in the positive. But if we take a look at YMAX, it's actually a larger universe of the funds that they have. So if you look at their top holdings and you click this link here, you can see about 30 of their holdings, including some of the very recent ones that have come out. And so the problem with this wider set of holdings is that you can pretty much see it right here. They all have had a pretty poor total return over time, as those distributions are so incredibly high. They're destructing their own value. And so in summary, guys, I mean, good for them for making this press release, because they got pickup all over the place, and folks are attracted to the idea of weekly distributions and these insanely high distributions. But I invite you to remember these performance graphs, because over time, they're not going to be performing, even though those distributions seem to feel good. And if I had to pick between YMAX and YMAG, the winner is pretty clear here. It's YMAG. But guys, overall, you know I'm a very conservative investor that's always looking for value and total return. And I've thrown some fun money against some of these YieldMax funds in the past and quickly turned them off. Currently, I threw about $1,000 into YMAG as just fun money, because for me, $1,000 is 0.0005% of my portfolio. And in my opinion, if you have more than 0.0005% invested into these YieldMax funds of your portfolio, you might want to reevaluate and pay closer attention to the overall total return. So I hope that was helpful for you as you think about and be careful with looking at these juicy distribution rates and really thinking about total return. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this dividend income update. And if you want a richer, real-time experience with me, you can always follow me on Instagram or X. And if you're doing your own research using Seeking Alpha, feel free to find the link below to subscribe if you want, no pressure. As always, I encourage you to do your own research, then implement and learn by putting it into practice. And as a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor, so keep in mind these videos are for entertainment and inspiration only. I'll see you on the flip side.